allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, are there any disclosures of interest from board members? If not, I would like to take a look at the previous board meeting minutes.
Move approval, Anderson.
Second, Betcher.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, review the agenda. I guess I would like to...
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, we'd like to move up the human resources items to help our consultant schedule, and then also noting that there's a map that has been added to the public works item.
All right, agenda approval with those two changes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Consent agenda, we have two items.
Move approval.
Motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, we will start with our Human Resources Retention Committee report. Oh, we can move that too.
Personnel Committee first.
Personnel? I think we're looking at a flash drive there. If you're, yep, go ahead, Tom. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, the Retention Committee met, I think it was a week and a half ago, and came up with some additional Retention Committee items that they would like to present to the board for your discussion and or approval. There are three different items in front of you today. I'm not sure what order you have them in. The first is supporting the allocation of $15,000 or up to $15,000 for the employee retention budget to go towards increased manager supervisor training. So do you want me to read through that, or is that pretty clear?
That's pretty.
We've had discussions about it, and I think there's been generally consensus for that.
You don't have to read it.
The second one on that sheet is a new item that hasn't been discussed with the board, supporting the allocation of $80 per employee to provide gift certificates for county logo wear. This would be for either the county store for employees, staff, or the sheriff's office for their vendor that they use. This is a good faith gesture to thank all Goodhue County employees and promote the new branding. This is something similar. I think Commissioner Betcher brought this up. We've also talked with our vendor. The city of Red Wing does something very similar to this, and so we wanted to put that forward before you. And then the final item is a proclamation for flexible work schedules. That's a fairly lengthy proclamation, but it's to encourage our employees and our managers to support flexible work schedules wherever possible. And I think we've had a lot of discussion about that as well. So I put those before you for discussion.
I'll speak just a minute about the issue of, and I think we use the term loosely, swag. Okay, and so I'll use that term. And what I had referenced was Three Rivers at the end of the calendar year gives each board member the opportunity to get one item from the store up to a certain value. And, you know, that's kind of how I was thinking of this, but I think other people on the committee were seeing it more as if we do it, that there'd be a certain dollar amount that they could divide it up as they pleased. But I think that the reason that this appealed to me is because the retention committee, we're trying to let every employee know we value them, we respect their work, and that we want to do things that we are able to do for them. And so to me, it was, as Tom said, a good faith gesture. I didn't have a strong feeling about whether it's one item for up to $80 or $80 that can be divided as you like. But to me, there were things that the retention committee did that helped people at these certain marks, but not something that was really helping every employee or saying thank you to every employee. So that's why it appealed to me.
And our vendor, Anchor, referenced two different companies that do something similar. The City of Red Wing, and I forget the name of the other committee, but they put in a dollar amount, and then it is something you can draw from as you pick items. So it
I
is
see.
a flat amount, it's not one individual item.
I understand. So the Three Rivers does it a different way. That's all.
And it can be done either way.
Yeah, I understand that.
Any other comments?
I would move approval of the training for the managers and the support for allocating 80 for county logo wear.
I'll second the motion.
Any other discussion?
Just one, the logo, $80 is just one-time shot? Correct?
And I think there'd be a deadline by which you'd have to use it. I don't think it's,
Yep, the company that we dealt with encouraged us to put a deadline on that.
yeah, and reasonable amount of time, but,
And then it would, I would assume it would apply to new hires would be able to get the $80 to buy logo as we hire people? Maybe that's not what this,
discuss that. It wasn't part of the discussion.
I mean, I
I guess it
I
depends
get hired
on-
in 2 weeks, but I wasn't here, then I'm not eligible. That, to me, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense that if you're a new hire, we also would do the $80 for new
I understand what
hire.
you're saying. I guess I was thinking of it more as an end-of-the-year thank you, which is a little bit different. So that's how I was thinking of it.
Okay.
But,
And that's the way it's written, but
Yeah.
I would think you would want new employees to have that opportunity.
I
We
understand.
can certainly take that back to the committee and
Okay.
discuss that.
All right.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Go ahead, Linda.
Going back to the manager and supervisor training, I, for one, would like to see that being mandatory, as opposed to, maybe they can do it or take it or not take it. And I also think it would be a very good idea to do that out of, have an independent come in to do that, to offer that training. It seems to me that if we could have done it in-house, we would have done it already. But I do think that if we're going to spend money on leadership training, that it should be mandatory.
Do we put that in as a suggestion or make that part of the,
Can that be put in there somehow?
We can make it, we can ask for it to be mandatory. And just your point on, would we have been doing it? HR has been offering training, quarterly training, or trying to do quarterly training. This is going to add on to that, and if we're paying for it, I think making it a requirement would be a good idea.
All right, well, that's how I lean. If we're going to pay $15,000, then I do think it should be mandatory.
Sure. And what the whole purpose is to try to make sure we're doing the best we can by the culture of working here. And,
Well, that would be consistent, too.
Yeah, it
So
would
then
be.
all managers have the same information.
Right. And the 15,000 wasn't particularly, we were tasked to come up with a number, and that appeared to be a reasonable number. So
We
that's
found
really,
some great training for $45,000.
yeah, well, it depends on how great it is, doesn't it? So I have no issue with it being mandatory, and I think it's good to at least have some of it be from the outside, because I think someone from the outside can see things that someone from the inside just can't see.
our motion and our second? Are you okay with changing? No.
Just a comment, and I don't want to, sometimes we have to look at who is providing the training, where you're getting the training, what we're doing, because as a manager, if you tell me I'm required to go sit through a 4-hour equity class, might, get a little annoyed with that. So we also got to look at who and where we're providing the training, and that's a big circle of how we're going to do this and who's going to provide it. So making it mandatory, what type of training is getting provided, a lot of questions that you have, and I get it makes sense, but I don't know if the retention committee was brought with where they're getting the training, who's doing the training, what training is provided. Again, that's very in-depth into it, but
Yep, no, that's a great question.
maybe there's options, and it might be more than what the board needs to dwell into, but I just would,
The reason I brought it up is that that has come up as, like, number one for retention is the culture within a department. And so if the managers have at least the same training, then it seems to me we've got a better chance of building a culture within each department where employees feel like they want to be, since we're spending so much time and money on retention.
Well, and I don't think that any of us really know how to set up employee training that are sitting here. We have ideas about it, but I could see where there might be some core things that everybody would do, but then there might be some choices. Like if you're a manager who has trouble dealing with conflict, you might want to watch something on conflict resolution. If you're a manager who...
That's true.
I mean, it could be that there'd be some options, and hopefully people would choose towards their weakness rather than their strength.
I think we're getting,
I understand.
I think we're getting outside of what our duties are.
Yeah.
We are policy and direction and oversight. We're now trying to tell staff how they should get training. That's management, that's not us. We're outside of our realm. We've allocated the dollars. I'm going to trust staff is going to do a good job of making use of those dollars to train our staff. And we're going outside of that when we start putting all the parameters around the training. And that's not we're not management. And we got to look out. We're getting a little too far outside of what our purview should be. I think the policy is we want our managers trained in leadership skills. We're putting some dollars towards that. Let them go do the training.
And how about the notion that some of that training come from the outside, just because?
I think then you're saying to our staff, there's nobody within our county that can train leadership within our county staff. And that to me is a bad message to send to
Yeah.
staff.
And the message...
I just don't like that.
The message I would be intending to send is we can all learn new things, and we can all gain from fresh perspectives, and that sometimes, again, somebody from the outside can see something that you can't see from the inside. So if I think about training in my career, you'd always go to somebody outside of where you were, because they could give you new information and new ideas. You wouldn't keep it all internal.
Like I said, we're going outside of
Yeah.
what our
Well-
real job is.
Yeah, I understand what you're
And
saying.
that's oversight
But-
and
But I...
policy. So I think they hear you loud and clear, but I'm not willing to really say, you have to do it this way, because that's really not my job.
I understand
So-
that. And the part that I would agree with, as far as Linda is concerned, that we need some of it to come from the outside. I think that that's necessary.
Right, we have a motion on the table and a second. I'm going to call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you.
The one additional item, I'm not, was the proclamation for flexible work included in that motion? I'm not sure.
No, it
No.
was not, because I viewed them as different.
And I think the discussion we had about flexible work was that certainly different managers are going to come to it from different points of view. And of course, what employees want is fairness and transparency. And if one department is doing it very, very differently than another, then instead of improving morale, it actually ends up hurting morale. So I think some of the training would need to be about how to make those decisions, how to have those discussions, that kind of thing. Because we're trying to make things better, not worse.
That's the goal.
That's the goal, yeah.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Thank you,
All
Commissioner.
right, thank you.
can I have you confirm that you can see the slides?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. In the beginning. Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Before I go through the PowerPoint, I just want to say that, this is the first year for our ongoing maintenance, and while we anticipate there would, is there like, am I too close? No, that's okay. Okay, is that better? I'll just do that. Because do you hear feedback? Okay. Is it just events? Okay. Or Ghost.
I think we're gonna get rid of microphones and just go to megaphones.
Yeah.
I'm a mom, I can yell. Yeah.
You can't hear online if you're not talking into the microphone.
Okay, perfect. So it's our first year of ongoing maintenance. There's some pain this year, I think, with just updating the rosters, timing the schedule, questions from department heads, from board. So next year, I know I talked with the HR group to say we should have monthly meetings to kind of address that and talk about the process. Like, it's very fluid, we can change it when we do it, how we do it, who gets communicated when, and what does that communication look like. So I hope that that makes it better next year. The focus, again, is really to see what is the pay grid and what is it doing compared to the market, compared to where the board wants to be. This is our first year of the job description review process as a whole. We've kind of took it in segments and did work since 2022 to this year. Last year, kind of moving the whole grid to one. So I just want to kind of review that. And some of these jobs we've looked at multiple times because of the process, but I just wanted to kind of go through kind of the process that we have been to get here. And really, what have we achieved is really moving the county to one pay grid, working with Health and Human Services to move from merit, reducing compression issues, both in the beginning and the end with supervisors, reporting structure, and to create competitive pay to the market. In the memo and information, there was some information on pay philosophy of where the county board kind of wants to be. Again, that really is set by the board, and I would say it's almost like your gas gauge. It's a gauge to help you determine where are you in relation to the market, kind of where do you want to be, how do you want to move there, and but it's, again, one point in history, because when I run the data, if I run it in March, some entities are not implementing union contracts from 2023 until July. But that's why we do this every year, so we can catch those. So I just say that the pay philosophy is, again, set really by that board, where you want to be, how you want to pay employees. There's no magic number that all counties pay the same. They don't all have the same benchmarks. You have different service levels. So I think that's why it's important for the board to set that. It is based on the jobs, not like longevity or I really like so-and-so. It is based on the jobs, and it has to comply with pay equity. So the grid itself, or your wages, is really comprised of updated job descriptions, which then we classify for pay equity, determine internal or comp worth, and then we look at the market and we try to make that all manage into one grid. One thing that we're asked a lot is kind of, what are you seeing in the market? Are we different than everyone else? What's going on? I would say the labor shortage is still there. Some jobs are still hard to recruit for. Some of the, applicant pools you're getting are maybe full, but not of qualified people. The salary cap removal, so legislation had until this year that if the governor made a certain amount, you couldn't make more than that. That removal is not impacting public sector. You've seen some counties hire recently that have really increased their wages because of that. I just say that as a fact. I'm not saying we need to change anything today, but I just want to put it in a parking lot for something to address as we go. We really spent a big part of 2023 and 2024, I would say, as an industry, looking at those entry-level positions to make sure they were competitive with retail. If you can go work somewhere from $20 to $22 an hour, the county needs to be competitive in that. So I would say Goodhue County, as well as other counties, really focused the beginning part. Looking at that, state negotiations have impacted public wages at the county level, like public defender's office, even just some of the COLAs that were set. And then I would say upcoming changes to HR, so there's FLSA minimums that are going to be changed. Will there be minimum wage of $15 an hour, and how does that work? I just bring that up just to warn you, like as a parking lot, we're not addressing them today, but just so that you're aware, this is kind of what we're seeing throughout the state. What we know of our current system, it was designed to be competitive to the market, so about 15% of that market average. Again, pay philosophy is a gauge. The board can discuss if they want to change that, if they're comfortable with that. Is it doing what it intended to do as far as recruitment, retention? Are there any other issues that are happening because of it? The new grid, in talking with HR and some department heads, has really helped with recruitment and retention. But again, this is not something that we put on the shelf and wait. We continue to have these discussions of, is this where we want to be? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? The benchmarks here are the benchmarks that the board set. In my first memo that you received, that there is an error. I had that we were looking at the 5 when we set the pay philosophy, or looking at that. That was my error. It should have gotten removed from a meeting before when we had talked about different ways to come to the pay philosophy. Do we just look at specific counties? Do we look at all of them? Do we rank them? So that was my error. I apologize, but we do look at all of the benchmark counties. And I will just say here that one thing that we do is when we're looking at it, job titles aren't apples to apples because counties work different. They have more levels of supervision, accountability, and stuff like that. So when we're looking, we try to really look at what jobs we think that are apples to apples. And I know Scott's not here, but he did a really good job of helping us get even more information, like this department works this way, and here's, some of the things, so I can understand that, because I know the market, but I don't know how everything works internally. So I will say that we've tried to do our best in doing that. When we look at the market, we do use all those benchmarks. We review all the jobs every year, so even if you're not in the 1/3 of the cycle that we look at your job description, we're still looking at wages, because we want to catch anything before you get too far behind. We found this year 71 jobs to be statistically significant. We say they have 4 data points, meaning at least 4 of the counties had similar jobs. Are there some jobs that might have the same title that we didn't include? Yes, it might be because we didn't think they were equal in what they do based on the job descriptions. I would say if department heads have concern with that, they should really talk to their HR person so we can drill down even further. Most consultants will only do a handful of selected jobs, like 25, and that's what they do every year, and they set it. We like to look at every job, even if we only get one match, to see who else has one, because it can help us help you with staffing to say, in this, in this county, this is how they're working. We can actually see those numbers and kind of make some decisions based off of that. So we look at those, and again, the 1/3 is we're looking at your job description. So are you doing what, it says you're doing? Has stuff changed? Does your reporting structure change? And our findings this year was that currently your pay grid is averaged at about 7% of market min rates and about 119, 118 of the market maximum rates. Your wage spread, so if I'm a grade 10 from my min to my max, is about 55%. Benchmark average is about 39, and that's because you have 12 steps. So most counties will have 8 to 10 steps, so that wage spread is going to be different because it's going to take longer, or your steps are bigger between there. So the spread just widens out. Our classification recommendations on this slide are, the purple ones are really, they're not new positions, so no new people coming to the county, but like the training sergeant, was a different position that they kind of changed the duties and responsibilities into I would say, new position or new classification, as well as with the land use management restructuring, you have two new classifications. The job and the work has always been there, but it's just been restructured. So those are in purple, and the lighter color are the ones that we looked at in this job review, saying based on the changes that were made in the job descriptions, we would suggest a classification change. So again, like ongoing maintenance, we look at the road surface like you would your pavement improvement plan. We just did new construction last year with the new grid. We wouldn't anticipate a ton of changes, but there are going to be changes. And at the end of my report, I also listed some other jobs to consider looking at either this year or sooner, because they're starting to fall behind either market or like retention, recruitment are some of those issues. We can talk about that more, but I know you have a question, Board Chair.
Well, the bottom three, it's really not that we changed their job description, we changed their job duties.
Yep.
So, which then was reflected in, just so it's not,
Thank you.
we didn't write a job description to get them to a higher, no, their job duties have changed. This is where they should be located.
The questions?
Have one? When we do send out the information to whoever for the job descriptions, do people have enough time to be able to review those and get those back?
So they had a couple of weeks, I think, to look at their job description, and then, like, today, if the board says we agree with these 6 classification changes, they'll have a week to appeal that. At this point, their job shouldn't have changed that much from when they looked at it, they reviewed it, even to last year. That's why we give them a week, just so we can keep things rolling. If that's not enough time, then that's something that you guys can definitely move the timeline. But I would say at this point, they've looked at their job description, they've made changes, it was sent back to them. This is kind of just checking with internal equity, or did I miss something?
On this appeal process, any staff can appeal at this point too, right? Or does it have to be just those?
It's the ones that we looked at this year. I would say if other people have like appeals, that really should go through like the department head and their HR member. And I'm assuming you have like a reclassification request. Do you know what I'm saying? Because at this point, we didn't look at their job, so you know what I mean? We did
Yep.
that whole appeal process last year. It would be no different than if a new job came, I would classify the job based on the job description only. Then we look at the market and say, here's kind of where it falls internally. If a department head had a change and they said we need a reclassification request, we would do that throughout the year, and that's kind of when you would handle that, unless you literally say it's only the first month of the year. Some counties will do that in their policies.
So kind of following up on Todd's, if employees got another duty and the department head said, yeah, but it's not enough to get it reclassified, but the employee felt like it probably should get reclassified, they could ask to be reviewed or
The
not.
classification appeal has to be signed by the employee and supervisor. So if I think it needs to and you say it doesn't, and I'm the employee, then we have to talk to HR and figure out how we're gonna navigate that situation.
But there always is a process.
For sure, and there
Yeah.
is, and that's
Yeah.
why we have a check and balance, so that I, as an employee, just can't be, like, say I want more money. The appeal also can't say I wanna make what so-and-so makes. It has to be based on the job description, what's missing or warrants another review.
I just have a number of questions, but I wonder if you want me to wait until the end or to ask them as well? Go ahead. Okay. So to me, the setting the 15% as where we want to be isn't a pay philosophy. That's a tool to help us get to our pay philosophy. And I think our pay philosophy is things like we want overall equity, we want fairness, and we want what we do to be defensible. We want fiscal responsibility. We want to be legally compliant. We want to be competitive, which is what we were focusing on here. and we want to be consistent. So I think it's not the right message to say that our philosophy is to be 15% above the mean of the market. Our philosophy is to be competitive, fair, fiscally responsible, be transparent. And so I think the board decided on the current pay grid, and that's different than calling that our philosophy. So I think it's not accurate to say that's our philosophy, to be 15% above. Our philosophy is to be competitive, to be fair, to have equity, to follow the law. And
I would agree that the philosophy is built on that, but I need a measuring tool that.
right, but I don't think you should call the measuring tool our philosophy. I think you should call it a measuring tool. Or I think you should call it something that we use to reach our philosophy.
And like I said, it's a gauge, so.
I'm fine with calling it a gauge. I'm not fine with calling it, saying that the board decided this was the philosophy. The board decided to use this gauge to implement our philosophy. And we maybe need more discussion about what our philosophy is. So I had that question. And then, I was concerned about the number of counties, but my question to you is, I think you said there were 71 jobs, that there were 4 data points, at least. And how many jobs did we not have 4 data points for?
I'd have to look.
You think it's like 2 or 3, or do you think
No,
it's?
it's probably a bigger handful than that. But
Like-
I would say again, if you pull all of those, you're gonna have like one job that only has a.
No, I understand. I just wondered what the number was.
Yeah, I don't know
And,
that
and
offhand, but I
then the other thing that I wondered about was, and I don't need exact numbers, but I think when we went through this before, we had these graphs with little X's on it, and the X's represented different counties, and some of the jobs had all 11 X's, and some of them just had 3 or 4 X's, okay? So what I wondered about is, of the 71 jobs, roughly how many of them have 11 data points and how many of them only have 4? And the reason that I wondered about that is if there's a lot with only 4, it depends dramatically on who those 4 are. If those 4 are Houston, Fillmore, Wabasha, Freeborn, then we're probably too low. If those 4 are Olmsted, Rice, Steele, then we may be too high. And so I think we need to understand how many of these are being done with just 4 counties, and what 4 counties are they? Because otherwise, I don't think we can analyze the information that you're giving us. And then I think my last point for now is I looked up how you determined the range of a pay scale. And what it was is you took the highest that is allowed for that job and the lowest that was allowed for that job, subtract the difference, and then you divide the difference by the lowest number. But there's nothing in there about the number of steps. So the range is determined by the high job and the low job, whether or not you get there in 5 steps or whether or not you get there in 12 steps. So it's not that our range is higher because we have more steps. Our range is higher because we chose to put those steps at the top and to increase wages at the top the way we did. But it's not because there's 12 steps. The number of steps isn't part of the equation that's done for the math.
No, but it's something that you look at when you measure where you are to the market, because if I have a county that, like, I'm just gonna use police, sometimes they'll only have 3 steps.
Right.
So their wage spread could be like
Could be the same as ours.
20%, so there's a difference, so I always wanna make sure we're looking at that. Or if you have a county that it takes you 12 years to get to the top,
Right.
and one county only takes 6 years, we wanna be thinking about it.
I agree with that. But I'm saying that the number of steps is not part of the equation
No,
in how you
I understand.
determine.
I said that we need to, that's part of the reason why.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood, but I thought you said the reason our range was high was because we had more
And I
steps.
mean, you can look at like Dakota County, they have a really high wage spread, but they don't have steps, they have performance management. So
Yeah.
how they move there is very different than how you all move.
And then-
So I just like to
So I
explain why, because to me, if I were looking at this, I'd be like, why is that so high? Shouldn't we just cut it? And to explain some of the reasoning behind that. It could be number of steps, it could be percent between steps. It could be how your grid escalates from, however, from minimum to maximum. I just wanted to explain why that, to me, would look like a deviant for anyone observing.
Well, some of what we've done with 12 steps was addressing compression. And so compression, it doesn't matter.
I'm not suggesting 12 steps are wrong or that those
No, I
numbers
know-
are
I know
wrong,
that,
But
I
I
know
am
that, but
suggesting it's not part of the
that's-
equation.
That's a part of the reason why we went to 12 steps, was because it could reduce compression.
Yeah, well, there were a number of reasons why.
And just because somebody's a 90 here in the middle and somebody up above them is 117, that's kind of not the point in some instances, but you certainly need to be concerned about when somebody's below by quite a bit, as you would be if someone who was way above.
Well,
but
we need to be aware of it and the reasons.
It's,
So I'm just going to go back and say, I really do want to know how many were just 4 counties and what those 4 counties were, because I think that information is relevant. And then my only question about the classification change recommendations, we aren't saying what they're changing them from. So are we changing from a 105 to a 106 for the records support specialist?
it's on here, it's on the grid. It's on your grid. If you find a record specialist, they're at 105,
You mean on the grid that came last time?
Right on here.
Last night,
right on here.
yeah.
That's where they're at, and this is where they
That's
changed
what I
it.
wanted to know. I just want to know if they're all one step. That's what I wanted to know, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? What are your wishes?
What we didn't talk about is the 6 jobs at the end where we are out of alignment or really close to out of alignment. And the whole goal of what we did with going with a 3-year review was to make sure we didn't get out of alignment. None of those jobs are going to get better a year from now. What my suggestion is to approve the 6 that are listed up there, and then ask to have these other 6 looked at and brought back as to how we can bring them closer in line so that next year they aren't way out of whack.
I have one question about that. So I think the human resource managers are quite a bit different than a human resource director.
And
So,
that's why I pointed that out.
no, I understand
If you
that.
looked at it, their jobs aren't the same, but I
Right.
put them in there because someone would say, well, you have HR, why aren't you? And that's why I said that it's going to deviate from the market because the way
Right.
you're structured.
So-
They're not putting themselves there to ask for more money, and I'm not saying they need the more money. I'm just trying to call out why there's going to be a pink, because if you set a gauge of anything, Tessa, that falls below 90%, and that's kind of what Tom brought up, is maybe that would be helpful for the board too. What is that percent, or department heads, where should we start red flagging it? Is it 95%, 90%? That would be that pool. And to your point then, if anything deviates and needs a notation, why, that's where that would fall.
But my question is whether or not then there probably weren't 4 data points that you could compare human resource managers to. There probably were not.
The job would be the same, it's just that you segment it into departments versus.
Well, sort of. I think you don't have the same supervision, you don't have the same authority. The director of human resources is Scott, so we do have a director. And then these folks work under Scott. So I don't think that you'd have comparables, but maybe I'm incorrect about that, but that's how it seemed to me. And then when there's something that comes back at 90%, their job description was supposed to put them on the grid correctly. It was supposed to do that. And so are we suggesting that the process of putting them on the grid didn't work in that instance? Or is it that I don't want to pick any, like the court services director's responsibilities are different in Goodhue County than they might be in the comparable counties. And I don't know what the answer is to that, but I'm suggesting when something doesn't fit the way we expect it to, and the pay grade is set to be this 15%, how do you make a decision about why that is low?
Well, that's why we would then review, like we're planning to do with those at the bottom of the memo, to say, is it the job description? Like, is something missing or warrants another review? Is the job just very different? Or is the market pushing it, which means why does the market value it more than we do? And so we have to look at it. When I say red flag, I'm just saying you're deviating from the market and why. Again, when we put you into the grid, the whole intent would be to be at
Accurate.
the desired place of the market. But the market actually moves slower than you did last year. Your grid is currently calibrated better than we anticipated it to be. Not all jobs are going to be equal because of pay equity and where we have to slot them in. We can't just say we're going to pay every single job this way to the market because it's going to cause inequities. So we just look at it, and like I said, the grade, the classification is all determined by updated job description, internal equity, market competitiveness, and then we just have to look at it internally. Is there a recruiting retention issue that's pushing it? Is it like a restructure? Do we need to look at it, how we value it, and that's why we just kind of red flag it to say why, and then go deep.
I would move to approve these 6 job classifications and to, at the next board meeting, if possible, bring back these other 6 and some clarification around them, and if there truly is a need to change them.
Is that possible between now and the next board meeting, time-wise?
It was 45 minutes ago in personnel, they said they could.
Okay,
But my question would be, is if they're there to watch, why would we make a decision on them now as opposed to doing what it's saying, to watch them?
Excuse me, there's no second. If you're going to move on to discussion, the motion is not seconded.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
So my question would be is why wouldn't we do what you suggest here and watch them and look at it again in a year?
If you had a pothole in a road, would you just wait to fix it until it's designated to be fixed, or would you fix it right away? That's part of the
Depends.
ongoing maintenance, is that I call it to your attention. If you choose to not want to do it, that's your choice. I'm just calling it because I see it starting to fall behind, and I would rather have minimal budget disruption than wait until it's reviewed, and now instead of being 10%, it's 20% under market. You guys can decide at that point, nope, we agreed to these 1/3 and that's all we're gonna look at. That is totally your decision. I'm just here to guide you.
Thank you.
All right.
I'd like
we have
to
a-
at least look at them because they do seem considerably low compared to the others.
Information's always good, and that's what we're asking for, is the information.
And you could even push it so that those jobs are included in the next round, and that starts in 2025. That's a way of like putting it on you know what I mean? Like
Right, I
the next
understand that.
round, and addressing it that way
So,
too.
so not waiting 3 years,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
put it back on for next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any more discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that there's a couple of other things we need to talk about. I don't often get calls from department heads after meetings, okay? And yesterday I heard from several. And one of the biggest concerns that people had was the short window of doing this appeal. And I understand that it's the same amount of time that was given last year, but a big part of why we did the pay study, why we implemented the pay study, is because we wanted to support our employers. So when I'm hearing from several managers or department heads that a week isn't sufficient time, I feel like we need to listen to that. And so I think we have to give people 2 weeks and not 1 week. And I believe one of the department heads was going to be on vacation most of that time and wasn't going to have the ability to do that. So
You're only talking about 6 positions.
well, I think they
You're not
can.
talking about the whole,
Okay, so what I'm hearing from department heads is they're asking for more time, okay? And I don't know why we wouldn't respect their request for more time. And, you know, I asked, well, what's reasonable? And they said they thought, you know, they'd like more than 2 weeks, but they thought 2 weeks is reasonable. So if we're trying to improve the culture and improve the morale within the county, I think paying attention to what we're hearing from multiple department heads makes sense. So I think we need to give them the 2 weeks and not just 1 week, okay? I don't see where that hurts anything, and it's what's being requested of us, or at least requested of me.
Is there still time to get our numbers December? That wouldn't be then.
So we just have to move it then to a different board meeting.
Yeah, if we extended it to 2 weeks, we wouldn't be able to do it at the next board meeting. And the reason, it is the whole 1/3 that we did this year that would be up for review, that could appeal it once the determination is made. The issue is, and I think you mentioned it earlier, these people have all reviewed their jobs. They've already submitted it, had it approved by their supervisor. Right now, they're looking at the classification. And so they've done most of the work on this. So the 1 week turnaround is similar to what we did last year and should be plenty of time.
Yeah, but that's not how the department heads are perceiving it.
Sure.
Yeah, so
Understood.
I understand that you're perceiving it that way, but that's not how they are.
And a reminder, they can't appeal their pay. They can't just say, I did
I understand that.
market analysis and this is what I should be making. It has to be related to the job, and that's kind of why. You guys can, this is really a process. If you guys want to wait a year to do it, I am totally fine. I got other work to do. If you want it to be a week to be consistent and to keep things rolling, because I know some departments are anxiously waiting for this to finalize, that is totally you guys. I will do whatever you want.
And we can certainly defer to the department heads if they need that additional time, but we think that there's very minimal work that needs to be done to get ready for that next process. And we would, like I said, we'd miss the next board meeting.
Yes, so a question that I would have for the department heads who believe they need more time, could they request that? And you know, I don't know why we wouldn't respect that.
They sure can.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just if you're getting questions on process, I would just encourage the commissioners to point out to the department heads that they can certainly ask Human Resources these questions next time, or the county administrator. 0 department heads contacted me on this. We just had a meeting on this yesterday.
Yeah, I know that. That's why I got calls all afternoon after the meeting. Okay.
And they should have been encouraged to talk to their county administrator.
The other thing, again, I think that what we were trying to do with the whole pay study was to improve morale and improve retention. And I think some of the decisions we make around things like not giving the department heads the time they want does exactly the opposite. So I think that that's not what the goal is. I think, you know, and I'm going to make one, I think it'll be my last comment. I think one of the goals was really transparency and fairness. And well, I don't know how transparent and fair it is, but I've heard from 5 department heads in the course of this year and 3 in the course of the last few days that they don't see the process as fair and transparent. And I think that's a real problem. It's not one we're going to solve today. I'm not asking you to solve it today. But I think if what we're trying to do is improve retention, and 5 of our department heads feel that it's neither transparent nor fair, I think that's a problem. And you can tell me it's transparent and fair, and maybe it is, but that is not how people are seeing it. That's a problem.
Any other comments?
I got a comment. So, just to clarify what you're talking about, they're just asking for another week to review what the job descriptions.
To be able to
classify-
rewrite it.
To be able to rewrite it, okay. We haven't necessarily voted and said we're moving ahead, so I guess I would ask the board, if Susan heard from department heads, what difference is a week or 2, or we don't have to do anything by next board meeting? Is there any real reason that we can't, as a board, we haven't approved that classification, correct? I don't think we specifically approved it. We can pretty much say as a board consensus is give HR direction, send the note back out, we're not making any changes, adjustments till the second meeting in December. So if anybody wants to appeal or has to change these, I would agree, say that's fine. if we're going to make any definite discussions. And it's
Did we just move to change 6 job classifications?
6 job classifications.
Yeah, so any.
I don't know if
any
that was
appeal
all of
process-
them.
Any appeal process is there for the rest of them.
Yep.
So I.
We have
I
the
don't know
6,
what
and
to
we're
do.
open to any
don't
changes. I don't know what's happening at the next meeting in December that feel that we're saying we're pigeonholed
Yes,
in.
I interpret it as, okay, if we can bring it to the December 3rd, and then if there are more questions, then we would have one more after that. Whereas now we're saying, if we allow 2 weeks, then it comes to the 17th and we make our decision.
And the next board meeting would be if there were any appeals that were successfully changed, we would bring those forward to the board.
So we can send a consensus from the board and to all department heads, anybody working, if they have questions, if they have concerns about the process or the classification, to submit them to HR, and you will take them under, and they will come to the board. Is that what they're looking for? I mean, I don't know that we,
I don't know if anybody feels comfortable responding. If they don't, that's okay.
well, and the other question mark is that, everybody's talking about retention, morale, and everything we have, and Scott, you're listening and you're hearing, if it's a question mark that you said none of the department, I mean, that's not unusual for Goodhue County here, that they've talked to a commissioner before going to HR or the administrator. So you guys got to look at within, not just us, so, but I would agree with, if Susan's getting comments or questions, if anybody has stuff that they want to bring forward, the board's open to it, HR is open to it. If there's a problem, then yes, go ahead and talk to administration or talk to a commissioner, make sure that your feelings, your thoughts, everything is
Right.
getting,
The goal of all of this was to
Yes.
improve retention,
Retention,
improve morale.
communication.
not- Yeah. And
So-
to be transparent, fair, and equitable is what we need to do.
I guess what my concern is if they just had a managers meeting yesterday and then don't talk to the administrator and then talk to you instead,
Well, I
I do have
can't
concern
speak
with
to
that.
that. It wasn't me seeking people out, I can tell
Right.
you that. But as I understood it, I think the managers didn't have much notice of this meeting and what the content of it was going to be. And so I think that their meeting occurred yesterday, and the only time to impact the board would be by calling before the board meeting.
we can move on.
Yeah,
I
we
think they
can.
know there's open mind to looking at it all, so.
Yeah.
yes, yep, you may come up. We left it on. We left it on.
Now you turned it off.
Okay. In our office, we're fine with the week appeal. I think we've got most of our ducks in a row. It's going to take a little bit of time. But what I told the personnel committee is, I don't want everything to get jumbled into one pot and then kicked down the road a little, because there's a motion on the floor now to approve the 6 changes.
Thought we voted on it.
There was a motion, a second, and it was approved.
Sorry. So anyway, my point, we think this isn't a perfect system, but it's working for us. We will be able to appeal what we have to appeal, and by the way, they're not, the only ones that are being appealed are the ones that were evaluated this year. It's a third of the county, just so for clarification.
Correct.
So that's my point, or that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, and we can move to the, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, we appreciate it. We'll move on to the taxpayer and finance services fee schedule. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner and Board. So before you, I have the proposed 2025 fee schedule. Just a little background, the management team reviews the fees yearly and makes adjustments as they feel is needed. There are a number of new fees to include the cannabis registration fees that we will be taking on in 2025. We recommend that the county board approve the attached fee schedule and make it effective January 1st, 2025. Do you have any questions or comments?
I had reached out to Teresa and asked her some questions, and I think she sent the form.
Excuse me, I believe this is a public hearing, so we need to have a motion to open public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Move to open the public hearing.
Second?
Second, all in favor? Aye. All opposed, motion carries. All right, public hearing is open. Does anyone from the public wish to speak on the fees? Second, anyone wish to speak? And third time, anyone wish to speak?
Close public hearing.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to close public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Any comments from the board?
Well, Teresa provided the information, the best that she had, about when fees were last changed. And so I went through and counted, and I didn't count the ones that were brand new in 2025 or the ones that listed statute next to it, and I think Teresa said there might be some more that are statute than what she had listed. But there were 52 fees that were last changed between 2004 and 2009. And of course, I think that there's very little that costs the same now as it did between 2004 and 2009. There were 78 fees that were last changed between 2010 and 2019. And there were 26 fees that were changed since 2020 through now 2025. And the reason that I looked at that is because I think one of the reasons Goodhue County is more dependent on levy for tax dollars is because we haven't changed a lot of these for 10 or 20 years. And I think the question is that how we want to do it? Do we want to keep these fees low and rely on levy, which is certainly one way to do it? Or do we want to say, well, maybe we need to get these fees up to what the average is of our 11 counties and then increase them by the CPI, and maybe that isn't what we want to do. What Teresa suggested is we certainly don't have time to change that today or now, but one of the ideas that I was thinking may make sense is for things that haven't been changed since 2019. Since 2015, inflation is a little over 30%. And if things haven't been changed since 2010, it seemed perfectly reasonable to increase those by 10%. And things that haven't been changed since 2009, to me, it made sense to increase them by 10% one year, 10% another. But then I thought we should probably do a CPI. And then if department heads don't feel it's right to increase that, if we can't by statute, if we can't whatever, then we wouldn't do that. But that philosophy would be saying that that all of these fees shouldn't have been transferred that much over to levy as they have been, because the costs of all of these things certainly aren't what they were in 2004, 2009. So I think we will end up wanting to approve these, but I think we need some discussion about what our philosophy is on fees.
Just how many of these fees are used in a year? Are every one of these line items used multiple times? One, or is there two people using them, or nobody using them, or kind of I mean, yeah, we have to have them all, but how many are actually used?
And how much income do we actually get from all of this? How has that changed over the last 20 years? And so I understand your question.
I can speak to that a little bit here, Commissioner. I guess, I don't know if it makes sense to drill down into the detail during this meeting out of each and every single one of these line items, but I can give you an example here. Under Finance and Taxpayer Services, we have a duplicate tax statement fee. We charge $3. If somebody loses their tax statement, they want to come into our office and get a printout of a new tax statement. We charge $3. We've charged $3 for that since 2005. ultimately, how much should we charge for that? $3, we get angry people. When we want to charge them $3, we could charge $4, we could charge $5, but, you know, some of these things, and at the end of the day, it doesn't add up to a whole lot of money, a lot of these fees. For example, you know, a lot of these are limited by statute.
Right.
Another one on here is confession of judgment fee. We charge $100 for a confession of judgment. These are people that most likely are delinquent on their property taxes. They're probably 2-3 years behind on their property taxes, and the state sets the interest rate on a COJ. For a homesteaded property, by statute, it's 10%. These are people that are on really hard times, and I would certainly argue that we cannot increase that $100. We've spent time looking, at least in the finance department specifically, we spent time looking at our fees. I compared to a handful of other counties, including Hennepin County, and some of these fees here are in line with what Hennepin County is charging, which obviously is a lot bigger. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we did spend a lot of time looking at this, at least within the finance department. You know, I'll parrot this. I've said this a lot lately. We've been really busy. What with the election that was going on, officially we were handed this project. We had it for about a month to coordinate this. And I certainly agree that we should be looking at these fees quite a bit more closely. And I think that's the plan for going for next year, absolutely, because some of these probably should be adjusted further. But in the meantime, these fees do need to be set by year end. That way they're set for going forward.
I understand that. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but I am suggesting if something hasn't been changed for 20 years, there could be very good reasons for that.
Yep.
And there could be that there aren't very good reasons for that.
Yep.
And again, I think it's a philosophy about how we want to do that. But it has to have shifted. People's wages have gone up a lot since 2004. So I just think we need to look at it. And there may be some that we don't want to increase at all, but there may be some that we actually do. And I think we need to take a closer look at it.
Absolutely, and I can give you a prime example here of when we do tax estimates for, complicated tax estimates for people that come in and say they want to put up a new house or that kind of a thing, they can come in and get an estimate. Previously, we were charging $25 an hour. The purpose of a fee is to help offset the cost of the services being provided. It's not a revenue maker, right? So we went through and looked at that and said, you know, instead of charging $25 an hour, we should probably charge $40 an hour. But for context of the total amount that we collect, it's less than $1,000 a year. So yes, we are increasing it, going the right direction, but at the end of the day,
Do you know how much total is collected from all of these?
that would take a lot of work to put that
Okay,
together.
that's
I mean,
okay, that's okay.
we could do that.
When I was on the Wakuta Township Board, we had the building guy, and we just made sure that what we charged covered what we paid him. That was all it was. But I think we're not doing that at this point.
I couldn't speak to building permit fees.
Yeah,
I know
well,
Sam was
I don't-
looking
I
at that
don't
before
mean
she left.
Specifically building permits, I
Sure.
don't mean that. But I think there's some things that shouldn't be raised, there's probably some that are, unless our philosophy is we want to keep these low and pay the difference in levy, which it could be, but we should at least be aware that that's what we're doing.
Good point, thank you.
I'd move approval of the fee schedule as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Next line item. Is that it?
Public Works.
Oh, Public Works, there we go. Set special day for board meeting date.
Good morning, Commissioners. Today I'm here to discuss with the board setting a special county board meeting to discuss revoking Old CASA 1, County Road 1, as it leaves the city of Red Wing prior to going up the hill. Used to veer off and go down what is now 299th, which is part of Featherstone Township. that section of road we have retained as part of our right-of-way and been maintaining since 2006. So today, I'm here to ask the board to consider setting a special meeting in the township. The report indicates January 14th as being that date at 7:30 p.m. I have been informed that that is a conflict for a couple of the board members. So we could recommend taking a look at the February 11th meeting, and the township has indicated that meeting at 6 p.m. at their town hall would be appropriate. So with that, are there any questions from the board?
I'd move to set the meeting in February, at the board meeting for the township in February, when their board meeting, and coordinate the two.
Second.
And is
Motion.
it 6 o'clock? Is that what?
6 p.m.
6 p.m.?
Yeah, that's what I was just clarifying with 6 PM. That's early for Featherstone Township, isn't it?
They would like to handle it before their regular meeting.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. For your information, of intent to purchase easement for DNR fisheries. Questions on that? Staffing report? Canvassing board meeting went well?
Yes, it did, no issues.
Project status report? New and old business? Committee reports?
Just one, I attended the Department of Revenue's proposal, well, not really a proposal, their concept about how to change taxing around electric generation plants, I'll say XL or any coal plant, the refuse to energy plants, the pipelines, the transmission lines. Railroads. And their concept was to pull it out of real estate tax and to tax it based on gross operating revenue and net operating revenue. And then they would have factors and they would calculate how much tax they pay based on that, which all was going well at the meeting I was at in Mankato, till someone asked the simple question, that takes it out of school bond referendums and school operating referendums. And that took them back to, they got to go back and figure that out. Because once you take it out of real estate tax, now those taxing factors that determine how much they pay to those two is totally gone. So that was thankfully, there was someone on the line that asked that question
Understood
because
that.
it kind of derailed it. They have to rethink it. I'm not totally opposed to what they're trying to do to get in line and get less tax challenges, because nobody sells a nuclear plant, so how do you value it? And, everything in DOR is based on sales and blah, blah, blah. So it was kind of an interesting meeting, but I was glad I went in person, because I got to talk to Commissioner Markwart, I got to talk to 4 of the staff from DOR directly, and I think there's real value in that person-to-person approach when you meet on that. They were really, I think they've done a good job, but that was just like one stone they hadn't unearthed yet.
I listened to a different one virtually, and one of the questions that didn't get addressed, but I wondered about, was if you're doing a gross operating tax, how are the dry casks that are stored there, how is that looked at? That's just not considered at all? because certainly, right now, there's a value, not just to the operating of XL Energy out here, but there's also a lot of value to them in the permits that are given to store the dry casks there. And I think that would be lost, whatever value there is with that.
Well, I mean, you have to remember, this is a concept.
I understand that.
They're
I
trying to move
understand that.
from something, and there's a lot of moving parts, but,
And there's always intended and unintended consequences to whatever you do.
Yep, and obviously, that one was major to them, because how do you get that back into the tax system to cover? And I, quite frankly, after the meeting, I sent them an email and showed them what the debt of schools in Goodhue County is, what the debt of the cities and what the debt of the county is, and then also talked about operating levies that schools have. And, they range from probably a low of 500, it's probably even higher than that, up to 12, 13, 1,400 a pupil unit. Well, you take that out of the mix, that will shift that burden drastically.
Yeah, it's huge.
So they have to work on that, but it was a really good meeting. They were really receptive to the comments, so it was good.
Thank you. I did ask the board to review the planned unit developments, that was going to come before us, but that has been pulled from the agenda, so study up on it
You mean pulled from the agenda?
next for the 3rd of December. So the request has been pulled, so.
Do we know anything about why?
No, just the board, the Planning Advisory Committee voted it down unanimously last night. Claims. Should we pay our bills?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you.